The message came through the Galactic Communication Network at exactly 0347 hours Earth Standard Time. Commander Sarah Chen was the first human to hear it. She sat alone in the night shift monitoring station aboard the United Earth vessel Prometheus, her coffee growing cold as static filled her headset. Then, cutting through the noise like a blade through silk, came a voice speaking in broken galactic common. "Please, anyone. They are killing us. The Vrikari are killing us. We need help. Please." Sarah's fingers flew across her console, triangulating the signal. Her heart hammered against her ribs as coordinates appeared on her screen. The Althean system, 300 light-years from Earth's colonial territory. A species humanity had never encountered, crying out into the void for salvation. She reached for the emergency alert button without hesitation. Within 6 hours, the message had traveled up the chain of command from the Prometheus to Earth's High Military Council. Admiral James Morrison stood at the head of a conference table in Geneva, surrounded by the most powerful military minds humanity had ever produced. The recording played again, filling the room with the desperate plea of a dying civilization. "The Altheans are a minor species in the Outer Rim," explained Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Earth's chief xenobiologist. She pulled up holographic images of slender, blue-skinned beings with large eyes and delicate features. "They evolved on a low-gravity world with minimal predators. Their bodies are fragile by our standards. A fall that would bruise a human child could kill an adult Althean." "And the Vrikari?" Morrison asked, his voice like gravel. The hologram changed, showing reptilian creatures with thick scales and muscular limbs. "Conquerors. They've absorbed 17 species into their empire over the past 2 centuries. The galactic community has done nothing because the Vrikari are careful. They only target species too weak to fight back and too isolated to matter." Morrison studied the images, his jaw tight. "The galactic community? You mean the Collective Council?" "Yes, sir. I've already reached out through diplomatic channels." Dr. Tanaka's expression darkened. "Their response was that they will discuss the matter at their next scheduled assembly in 3 months. The room erupted in angry murmurs. 3 months. An entire species could be exterminated in 3 months. "How many Altheans are there?" Morrison asked. "Approximately 4 billion on their homeworld. Another 200 million spread across 3 colony worlds. 4 billion lives." Morrison had served in Earth's military for 40 years. He had seen humanity climb from the ashes of its own near extinction during the resource wars. He had witnessed the discovery of faster-than-light travel, the establishment of colonies on distant worlds, and first contact with alien civilizations who looked upon humans with a mixture of fear and contempt. Deathworlders, they called his people, monsters from a planet so hostile that simply surviving there required strength most species could not comprehend. The other races of the galaxy avoided humans when possible. They traded at arm's length, communicated through intermediaries, and whispered about the savage primates who had crawled up from a world of crushing gravity, poisonous atmosphere, and constant violence. They did not ask for help. They did not expect kindness. But here was a message from a dying species, broadcast into the darkness with the desperate hope that someone, anyone, might answer. "How long until the Vrikari complete their conquest?" Morrison asked. Dr. Tanaka checked her data pad. Based on their previous campaigns, they typically subjugate a species within 8 to 12 weeks. The initial invasion began approximately 2 weeks ago. We have perhaps 6 weeks before the Althean people cease to exist as a free civilization. Morrison looked around the table at his fellow officers. He saw the same fire burning in their eyes that he felt in his chest. Humanity had been alone once, abandoned by a universe that did not care whether it lived or died. They had survived through stubborn will and the refusal to accept defeat. Now another species faced that same darkness. "The Council won't help," Morrison said slowly. "They never help. They write reports and pass resolutions while worlds burn. "Sir," said General Park, commander of Earth's ground forces, "the Althean system is 300 light-years away. We'd have to cross through neutral space and potentially violate half a dozen treaties to get there." "I'm aware. The political consequences could be severe. The Council might sanction us. The Vrikari will definitely declare war." Morrison smiled grimly. "The Vrikari have been itching for an excuse to test humanity for decades. They think we're just another weak species hiding behind technology. Maybe it's time we showed them what a Deathworlder is really capable of." The decision was not made lightly. Emergency sessions of Earth's global parliament were called. Debates raged across news networks and social media. Some argued that humanity had no business interfering in alien affairs. Others pointed out the risk of war with a major galactic power. But beneath all the arguments, a simple truth emerged. Humanity could help, and therefore humanity must help. The vote passed with a margin of 73%. Within 48 hours, the first expeditionary fleet began assembling at the Titan shipyards orbiting Saturn. 27 warships representing the pinnacle of human engineering and military might. Battleships with armor plating forged in the heart of stellar furnaces. Cruisers bristling with weapons designed to crack planetary defenses. Carriers holding thousands of strike craft piloted by the finest combat veterans humanity had produced. And at the center of the formation, the flagship Endeavor, a dreadnought-class vessel 3 kilometers long, equipped with weaponry that could reduce a continent to glass. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Endeavor as the fleet completed its final preparations. Around him, officers worked with quiet efficiency, running systems checks and coordinating the complex logistics of an interstellar military expedition. Through the massive viewports, he could see the other vessels of the fleet moving into formation, their running lights creating a constellation of human determination. Commander Chen approached him, a datapad in her hands. "Sir, we've received updated intelligence from our long-range probes. The Vrikari have deployed a fleet of approximately 50 vessels to the Althean system. They've established orbital bombardment positions over the homeworld and begun landing ground troops." "Casualties?" "Estimates suggest 200 million Althean deaths in the first 2 weeks. The main population centers have been targeted to break resistance." Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. 200 million lives. Individuals with hopes and dreams and families reduced to numbers on a report. "The Altheans are still fighting," Chen continued. "Their military technology is inferior to the Vrikari, but they haven't surrendered. They've established defensive positions in mountainous regions and underground complexes. The Vrikari are finding the conquest more difficult than anticipated." "Good. That gives us time." Morrison turned to face his command staff. "Ladies and gentlemen, in 12 hours, we will engage the faster-than-light drives and begin our journey to the Althean system. Our mission is simple. We will break the Vrikari siege, evacuate as many civilians as possible, and demonstrate to the galaxy that preying upon the weak carries consequences." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Some of you may wonder why we're doing this. The Altheans are not our allies. They have never aided humanity. They probably couldn't find Earth on a star map. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that they asked for help, and we have the power to provide it. That's what separates civilization from barbarism." The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed at exactly 0900 hours. The journey would take 6 days through the twisted geography of hyperspace. 6 days of preparation, training, and planning. 6 days for the people of Earth to wonder whether they had made the right choice. In the Althean system, the situation continued to deteriorate. The Vrikari commander, a veteran warlord named Kesix, tightened his grip on the planet with methodical cruelty. Cities burned, refugee columns were strafed from the air, underground shelters were pumped full of toxic gas. The resistance fought on, but their numbers dwindled daily. Premier Valthos of the Althean people sent out another distress call, his voice thin with exhaustion. "If anyone can hear us, please come quickly." "We cannot hold much longer. Our children are dying in the streets. Our elders are being executed for the crime of remembering freedom. I do not know if the universe contains mercy, but I pray that it does." The message was intercepted by a Vakari communications officer who played it for Commander Kessex with amusement. The reptilian warlord laughed, a harsh sound like stones grinding together. "Let them pray," he said. "No one is coming. No one ever comes. The weak exist only to serve the strong, and the Altheans will learn this lesson in blood and fire." He did not know that 27 human warships were hurtling toward his position at speeds that defied conventional physics. He did not know that the message had reached the ears of a species forged in the crucible of a hostile world, a species that had looked into the abyss of extinction and refused to blink. He did not know that humanity had decided, collectively and deliberately, to answer a stranger's prayer. The Endeavor's navigation officer counted down the remaining time to arrival. 5 days, 4 days, 3 days. The crew prepared for battle with the quiet professionalism of veterans. Weapons were checked and rechecked. Tactical simulations ran continuously. Marines sharpened their blades and tested their power armor. And in the depths of the flagship, Admiral Morrison stood before a memorial wall bearing the names of every human who had died in service to Earth. Thousands of names, stretching back to the earliest days of space exploration, explorers and scientists, soldiers and diplomats, ordinary people who had given their lives so that humanity might reach for the stars. "We're coming," he whispered to no one in particular. "Hold on just a little longer. Help is on the way." Across the void, light years distant, an Althean child huddled in a basement shelter while bombs fell on the city above. Her mother held her close, singing a lullaby in a voice that trembled with fear. Outside, the sounds of battle drew closer. Vakari soldiers were going door to door, dragging citizens from their homes. The child did not understand war. She did not understand why the sky people with scales wanted to hurt her family. All she knew was that she was scared and hungry and cold, and that her mother's arms were the only safe place left in the universe. She closed her eyes and made a wish. The way children do when the world becomes too frightening. She wished for someone to save them. She wished for heroes. In the darkness between stars, humanity answered. The Rakari sensor officer noticed the anomaly first. His console began screaming warnings about massive energy signatures emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. He blinked his reptilian eyes twice, certain that the equipment had malfunctioned. The readings suggested 27 vessels, each radiating power signatures, unlike anything in the Rakari database. "Commander Kessex," he called out, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. "We have incoming contacts, unknown configuration. They are very large." Kessex strode across the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's fist, irritation evident in every step. The conquest was proceeding on schedule. The Althean military had been reduced to scattered pockets of resistance. In another 2 weeks, the entire planet would be under Vakari control. He did not appreciate interruptions. "Show me," he commanded. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying the tactical situation at the system's edge. 27 red icons had appeared, arranged in a precise formation that spoke of military discipline. As Kessex watched, the icons began moving toward the inner system with deliberate purpose. "Identify them!" The sensor officer worked his console frantically. "Searching the database now, Commander. The hull configurations do not match any known species in this region. Energy output is extremely high. Each vessel appears to carry enough firepower to threaten a capital ship." Kessex felt the first stirrings of unease. His fleet numbered 50 vessels, but most were transport ships or light escorts. Only 12 were true warships capable of fleet combat. He had not expected opposition. The Altheans had no allies. The Galactic Collective had ignored their distress calls, as they always did. "Hail them," he ordered. The communication officer opened a channel, broadcasting in Galactic Common. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a voice filled the bridge, speaking with calm authority. "Vrakari Fleet, this is Admiral James Morrison of the United Earth Navy. You are engaged in the unlawful invasion of a sovereign world. You will cease all military operations immediately. Withdraw your forces from Althean space and surrender your fleet to our custody. Failure to comply will result in your destruction." "You have 30 minutes to respond." The bridge fell silent. Kessex stared at the view screen, processing what he had just heard. Earth. He knew the name. Every species in the galaxy knew the name. The death world at the edge of charted space, home to the primates who had somehow survived conditions that would kill any civilized being. They were supposed to be primitives, savages barely capable of spaceflight. "This is absurd," Kessex snarled. "The humans have no jurisdiction here. They have no treaties with the Altheans. They have no authority to make demands." "Sir," the tactical officer said quietly, "I've completed my analysis of the human vessels. They are significantly more advanced than our intelligence suggested. Their flagship alone masses more than half our combat-capable ships combined." "Then our intelligence was wrong." Kessex's claws scraped against his command throne. "Prepare the fleet for battle. We will teach these upstarts the cost of interfering in Vrakari affairs." Aboard the Endeavor, Admiral Morrison watched the Vrakari response with grim satisfaction. He had not expected them to surrender. Species like the Vrakari understood only one language. "All ships, this is the Admiral. Weapons free. Execute Battle Plan Alpha." The human fleet surged forward like a predator scenting blood. Battleships moved to the front of the formation, their massive guns tracking the distant Vrakari vessels. Cruisers fanned out on the flanks, establishing firing solutions. Carriers hung back, their hangar bays disgorging swarms of fighter craft that filled the void with deadly purpose. The Vrakari fired first. A barrage of plasma bolts and kinetic rounds streaked across the darkness between the fleets. The human vessels did not attempt to dodge. Instead, their point defense systems came alive, creating walls of defensive fire that intercepted the incoming projectiles with mechanical precision. Explosions blossomed harmlessly in the void. Then the humans returned fire. The Endeavor's main battery consisted of 12 electromagnetic accelerator cannons, each capable of launching a 2-ton tungsten slug at a significant fraction of light speed. When all 12 fired simultaneously, the kinetic energy released was equivalent to a small nuclear device. The first Vrakari warship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a vessel of proud conquest carrying 3,000 warriors. The next moment it was an expanding cloud of superheated debris. Commander Kessex watched in horror as a second ship died, then a third. The human weapons were beyond anything in his experience. His fleet's armor, designed to withstand conventional attacks, offered no protection against projectiles moving at such speeds. "All ships concentrate fire on the lead human vessel," he commanded, desperation creeping into his voice. The Vrakari fleet obeyed, pouring everything they had at the Endeavor. Plasma bolts splashed against the dreadnought's energy shields. Missiles detonated against its armored hull. For a moment, the ship was wreathed in fire and light. When the barrage ended, the Endeavor emerged from the chaos with minor scoring on its forward plating. Its shields had absorbed the overwhelming majority of the attack. Its weapons continued firing without pause. "Impossible!" Kessex breathed. "This is impossible!" The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, the Vrakari fleet had been reduced to broken hulks and drifting wreckage. Commander Kessex's flagship was among the survivors, but only because the humans had deliberately disabled it rather than destroy it. They wanted prisoners. They wanted the commander who had orchestrated the Althean genocide. On the surface of the Althean homeworld, the Rakari occupation forces received word of the fleet's destruction with disbelief. Their space superiority had been the foundation of the entire campaign. Without it, they were isolated on a hostile planet, cut off from reinforcement and resupply. Admiral Morrison broadcast a simple message to the ground forces. Surrender now, and you will be treated as prisoners of war in accordance with human military codes. Continue fighting, and we will remove you from this planet piece by piece. Some Rakari units chose to fight. They were dealt with by human marine divisions that descended from orbit in assault shuttles, their power armor making them nearly invulnerable to Rakari small arms. The Marines moved through occupied cities with the methodical precision of professional soldiers, engaging enemy combatants while carefully avoiding civilian casualties. Private First Class Marcus Rodriguez was among the first wave to hit the ground. He had grown up in the rebuilt ruins of old Los Angeles, a city that still bore the scars of the resource wars. He understood occupation. He understood what it meant to live under the boot of a foreign power. When his unit secured its first sector, they found an underground shelter packed with Althean refugees. The aliens were terrified, huddling in the corners and shielding their young. They had heard stories about humans, the Deathworlders, the monsters from the galaxy's edge. Marcus removed his helmet, revealing a face covered in sweat and combat grime. He smiled, the expression strange and unfamiliar to the watching Altheans. "Hey there," he said, his voice soft. "It's okay. We're here to help. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." An elder Althean, her blue skin pale with fear, stepped forward hesitantly. You are human?" "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" The question carried the weight of a civilization that had been abandoned by the universe. "Why did you come?" "We have nothing to offer you. We cannot repay this debt." Marcus thought about the question for a long moment. He thought about his grandmother, who had survived the resource wars by hiding in a basement much like this one. He thought about the stories she used to tell, about neighbors who had shared food when there was nothing to share, about strangers who had risked their lives to save children they had never met. "Because you asked?" he finally answered. "And because it was the right thing to do." Above the planet, the Endeavor established a protective orbit. Humanitarian supplies began flowing to the surface, enough food and medical equipment to sustain the surviving population through the immediate crisis. Engineering teams worked to restore damaged infrastructure. Communication officers coordinated with Althean authorities to establish evacuation routes and emergency shelters. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the relief operations unfold on his tactical display. They had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. The Rakari Empire would not accept this defeat quietly. Somewhere in the galaxy, their high command was already planning a response. "Sir," Commander Chen reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Collective Council. They're demanding an explanation for our actions." "Let them demand." Morrison's voice carried a cold edge. "Tell them we'll provide a full report when we're done saving the people they left to die." The diplomatic fallout would be significant. Earth's relationships with the other major powers would be tested. Trade agreements might be suspended, sanctions might be imposed. But Morrison knew, with the certainty that came from 40 years of service, that they had done the right thing. On the surface, the liberation continued. City by city, district by district, human forces pushed back the Rakari occupation. The remaining enemy troops faced a choice between surrender and destruction. Most chose surrender. They had seen what happened to those who chose otherwise. Premier Valthos emerged from his bunker for the first time in weeks. The Althean leader was gaunt and exhausted, his government reduced to a handful of surviving officials. When he saw the human flag flying beside the Althean banner over the ruins of his capital, he wept. A young human officer approached him, saluting crisply. "Premier Valthos, Admiral Morrison sends his regards. He would like to meet with you aboard the Endeavor to discuss the establishment of a formal alliance between our peoples." Valthos wiped his eyes, struggling to compose himself. "An alliance? After everything we've seen, after the horrors inflicted upon us, you would offer alliance?" "Sir, the human people believe that those who suffer together and fight together are bound by ties stronger than any treaty. Your people showed courage in the face of extinction. That earns our respect." The Premier looked at the officer, then at the Marines securing the street beyond, then at the orbital trajectories of human warships protecting his world. He thought about the message he had sent into the void, the desperate prayer that had somehow been answered by the most unlikely saviors imaginable. "Please tell Admiral Morrison that I accept his invitation," Valthos said. "And please tell him. Thank you. Those words are insufficient, but they are all I have." "They're enough, sir. They're more than enough." In orbit, the Endeavor's crew watched the sunset over the Althean homeworld. For many of them, it was the first time they had seen an alien sky. The colors were different, the clouds shaped by unfamiliar winds. But the beauty was undeniable. A world that had been dying was now breathing again. Commander Chen found Admiral Morrison in his ready room, reviewing casualty reports. The battle had not been without cost. 37 human personnel had died in the operation. 37 families would receive letters of condolence from a grateful government. "The Ricari prisoners are secured," she reported. "Commander Kessex is in the brig. He's refused to speak. He'll talk eventually. They always do." Morrison set down the reports. "What's the current status of the humanitarian effort?" "Medical teams have treated over 50,000 Althean wounded. Food distribution is reaching the worst affected areas. The population is beginning to emerge from shelter." "Good." Morrison was silent for a moment. "When I was a young officer, I used to wonder why we kept reaching for the stars. Space is cold and hostile. There are things out here that would kill us without a second thought. Why not stay on Earth, safe and comfortable?" "And now?" "Now I think I understand." He gestured toward the viewport, toward the stars beyond. "We're out here because this is who we are. We explore. We build. We protect. It's not about safety or comfort. It's about meaning. It's about doing something that matters." Chen nodded slowly. "The Council is going to make our lives difficult after this. Let them try. The Altheans are alive because we chose to act. If that's wrong, then I don't want to be right." The night deepened over the Althean world. In the ruins of cities and the depths of shelters, survivors gathered around makeshift fires and spoke of the strange beings who had descended from the heavens. Deathworlders, the galaxy called them. Monsters from a hostile world. The Galactic Collective Council assembled in emergency session for the first time in 300 years. The great chamber on the neutral world of Corinthus, filled with representatives from 78 spacefaring civilizations, their forms ranging from insectoid to crystalline to gaseous. They had come to address what many were calling the most significant disruption to galactic order in living memory. Ambassador Elena Vasquez represented Earth. She stood alone at the human delegation's podium, facing a sea of hostile and curious faces. The chamber hummed with whispered conversations and the electronic translations that allowed species with incompatible vocal structures to communicate. "The chair recognizes the Ricari delegation," announced the presiding counselor, a massive being that resembled a floating jellyfish. The Ricari ambassador rose, his scales gleaming under the chamber's lights. His name was Korthax, and he was the nephew of the Emperor himself. His voice dripped with barely contained fury. "Distinguished members of this council, humanity has committed an act of unprovoked aggression against the Ricari Empire. They have destroyed our fleet, killed our warriors, and occupied territory that falls under our sovereign control. This is not merely a violation of galactic law. It is an act of war. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Many species had long feared that humanity would eventually reveal its true nature. The Deathworlders had been too quiet, too cooperative, too willing to play by rules written by species who could not survive 10 minutes on their homeworld. "We demand immediate compensation for our losses," Korthax continued. "We demand the withdrawal of human forces from Althean space, and we demand that this council authorize punitive measures against Earth, including economic sanctions and military containment." Ambassador Vasquez listened to the translation with a calm expression. She had expected this. Earth's diplomatic corps had spent the past week preparing for exactly this scenario. "The chair recognizes the human delegation," the presiding counselor intoned. Elena stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. "Distinguished members, I thank the Council for this opportunity to address the charges against my species. Before I respond directly, I would like to present some evidence to this assembly." She activated her podium's holographic display. Images began to appear above the chamber, showing the devastation inflicted upon the Althean homeworld. Burned cities, mass graves, refugee camps overflowing with the wounded and starving. These images were taken by human reconnaissance drones during the Vrikari invasion. Over the course of 4 weeks, the Vrikari military killed approximately 250 million Althean civilians. They targeted hospitals, schools, and shelters. They used chemical weapons against population centers. They executed prisoners and burned agricultural areas to create artificial famine. The chamber grew quiet. Many species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Althean government transmitted distress calls to this council requesting humanitarian intervention. Those calls were received and logged. The council's official response was to schedule a discussion for the next quarterly assembly, which was scheduled for 3 months in the future. By that time, the Althean civilization would have ceased to exist. Elena paused, letting her words settle over the assembly. "Humanity did not act out of aggression. We acted because 4 billion innocent beings were being systematically exterminated while this council did nothing. We acted because the fundamental principles upon which this body was founded, the principles of mutual protection and collective security, were being betrayed by inaction." Korthax surged to his feet. "The Altheans were within our sphere of influence. Their world was claimed territory." "Their world was their own," Elena shot back. "No species has the right to claim another's existence. No treaty in this council's records recognizes the legitimacy of conquest through genocide. If such a treaty exists, I challenge the Vrikari delegation to produce it." The chamber erupted in debate. Species that had long harbored suspicions about Vrikari expansion saw an opportunity to voice their concerns. Others, fearful of human power, argued that the precedent of unilateral intervention could destabilize galactic order. The presiding counselor struggled to maintain order. In the midst of the chaos, a small figure rose from the back of the chamber. It was an Althean, the first of his kind to ever address the Galactic Council. His name was Tolvaris, and he had been a university professor before the invasion. Now he was one of the few surviving members of the Althean intellectual community. "May I speak?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the din. The chamber gradually fell silent. The presiding counselor, perhaps sensing the historical significance of the moment, nodded permission. Tolvaris walked slowly to the center of the chamber, his movements still showing the effects of malnutrition and trauma. He looked around at the assembled representatives, beings who had ignored his people's pleas while they died by the millions. "Before the invasion, I studied the history of civilizations," he began. "I believed that progress was inevitable. I believed that advanced species naturally moved toward cooperation and mutual benefit. I was wrong. He turned to face the Vrakari delegation. Your people came to my world with weapons and warships. You told us that resistance was futile. You told us that no one would come to help us. And for a while you were right. We called for aid, and the galaxy was silent. Then he turned toward the human podium. But then humans came, not for profit, not for territory, not for political advantage. They came because we asked, and because they believed that our lives had value. They came because they remembered what it was like to be alone in the darkness. Tolvaras's voice grew stronger. I am not here to argue law or politics. I am here to tell you what I witnessed. I watched human soldiers carry Althean children from burning buildings. I watched human doctors work through the night to save lives that had no strategic importance. I watched human engineers rebuild infrastructure that was destroyed by Vrakari bombs. These were not the actions of conquerors. They were the actions of friends. He addressed the full chamber. You call them Deathworlders. You fear them because their homeworld is hostile and their bodies are strong. But I tell you now that I have seen the true measure of humanity. And it is not their strength that defines them. It is their compassion. It is their refusal to look away when others suffer. It is their willingness to sacrifice for strangers. The chamber was completely silent. Even Korthax seemed momentarily at a loss for words. My people will forever be grateful to humanity, Tolvaras concluded, and my people will stand with them, no matter what this council decides, because that is what allies do, that is what friends do, that is what good people do. He returned to his seat. For a long moment, no one spoke. The deliberations continued for 3 more days. Arguments were made and countered. Evidence was presented and disputed. In the end, the council reached a compromise that satisfied no one completely, but avoided open conflict. The Vrakari were formally censured for their actions on the Althean homeworld. Their claim to Althean territory was declared void. They were required to pay reparations to the surviving population, though the amount was left deliberately vague. Humanity received no sanctions, but was warned against future unilateral military action. The Council established a rapid response protocol for humanitarian crises, though many doubted it would ever be used. Most significantly, the Althean people were granted full membership in the Galactic Collective, with Earth named as their formal protector. It was an unprecedented arrangement, one that effectively created a new power block in galactic politics. On the day the agreement was signed, Admiral Morrison hosted a ceremony aboard the Endeavor. Premier Valthos stood beside him on the bridge, flanked by dignitaries from both species. Through the viewports, the Althean homeworld hung like a blue jewel against the black velvet of space. This treaty represents more than a political arrangement, Morrison said, addressing the assembled guests. It represents a commitment. Earth pledges to defend Althean lives and Althean freedom for as long as our civilization endures. In return, the Althean people pledge to stand with us as we face the challenges ahead. We are no longer 2 species navigating the galaxy alone. We are partners. We are family. Valthos stepped forward to add his own words. My people have a tradition. When someone saves your life, you owe them a debt that cannot be measured in currency or favors. You owe them loyalty. You owe them truth. You owe them your best self, always. Humanity has saved the lives of billions. Our debt is beyond calculation, but we will spend every day trying to repay it. The ceremony concluded with the formal exchange of gifts. The Altheans presented humanity with a crystal sculpture depicting 2 hands clasped together, one human and one Althean. The humans presented the Altheans with a simple flag, the same flag that had flown over countless battlefields where human soldiers had fought for freedom. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy adjusted to the new reality. Other small species, emboldened by the Althean example, began reaching out to Earth for protection agreements. The Vakari Empire retreated behind its borders, nursing its wounds and plotting revenge. The Council watched and worried, uncertain of what the future might hold. On Earth, public opinion remained strongly supportive of the intervention. Surveys showed that over 80% of the population believed that saving the Altheans had been the right decision, regardless of the political cost. Schools began teaching Althean history alongside human history. Cultural exchanges brought artists and scholars from both worlds together. Commander Sarah Chen, the officer who had first received the distress call, was promoted to captain and given command of a new vessel, the Resolution. Her first mission was to escort an Althean diplomatic delegation to 3 other worlds that had expressed interest in alliance with the human Althean bloc. Private Marcus Rodriguez received a medal for his actions during the liberation. He declined offers of officer training, preferring to remain with his unit. When asked why, he explained that he felt most useful at ground level, where he could look into the eyes of the people he was helping. Admiral Morrison retired 6 months after the campaign, his final act in uniform being the commissioning of the first joint human-Althean warship, the Unity. In his retirement speech, he reflected on the meaning of the mission. "Some people say that we took a foolish risk," he acknowledged. "They say we could have started a galactic war. They say we should have let the Council handle the situation through proper channels. Maybe they're right. Maybe we got lucky. But I'll tell you something I've learned in 40 years of service. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the dangerous thing to do. And if we're not willing to take risks for what we believe in, then we don't really believe in anything at all." On the Althean homeworld, reconstruction continued at a remarkable pace. Human engineering expertise combined with Althean artistic vision to create cities that were more beautiful than anything that had existed before the invasion. Memorials were built to honor the dead, including a special monument to the 37 human soldiers who had given their lives in the liberation. The little girl who had huddled in the basement shelter during the bombing grew up to become a diplomat. Her name was Sarah, and she spent her career strengthening the bonds between her people and humanity. She never forgot the night when the monsters from the Deathworld descended from the heavens and proved themselves to be angels instead. Years later, when she was an old woman, she gave a speech at the annual celebration of Liberation Day. She spoke about fear and hope, about darkness and light, about the moment when her people had believed they were alone in the universe and discovered that they were not. "The humans have a saying," she concluded. "They say that a friend is someone who comes when everyone else has left. By that definition, humanity is the best friend the Althean people have ever known. And we will never, as long as stars burn and worlds turn, forget what they did for us." The galaxy continued to change. New alliances formed. Old empires declined. The Vakari eventually collapsed into civil war, their dreams of conquest shattered by internal strife. The Galactic Council evolved, incorporating more species and establishing better mechanisms for humanitarian response. Through it all, the bond between humanity and the Altheans remained strong. 2 species that had been strangers became partners, then friends, then something that transcended both categories. They had been forged together in the fires of crisis, and nothing in the universe could break what that fire had created. And whenever another species faced extinction, whenever a desperate plea went out into the void, there were now 2 civilizations ready to answer. The Deathworlders and their allies, the warriors and the dreamers, the humans and the Altheans standing together against the darkness. Because that was the lesson the galaxy had learned, the lesson that would echo through history for millennia to come. When you cry out for help, someone might actually be listening. Someone might actually care. Someone might come to save you, not because you have something to offer, but simply because saving you is the right thing to do. In the end, that was the greatest gift humanity gave to the galaxy. Not their strength or their technology or their military prowess. It was the simple, radical idea that every life has value and that good people do not look away when innocents suffer. The Altheans had asked for help. The Deathworlders had answered, and the universe would never be the same. But to the Altheans, they were something else entirely. They were hope.